Today I'm going to be going through the malware training to kind of make it so everyone's a little bit more aware of some of the bad software that can be loaded on computers. Because recently we've had a couple of incidents, one in the American International School in Ghana and the other one in Togo, right, in Lomé. So those schools have been hit with ransomware, so we're trying to educate everyone at our school to be a little bit more aware of these dangers. So the first two slides are going to show some statistics dealing with identity theft and also malware, kind of both combined. Because one of the main targets of a lot of this bad software is to try to steal information so they can use it for identity theft, which is, a financial crime, right? And if you ever get infected by it, or if you know anyone who's been affected by it, it's a major pain to recuperate from that, right? It causes a lot of grief. The last one on the right-hand side, the last column, the 95%, kind of is like the big point why we're doing this, is that 95% of these things happen because people just make mistakes. Right? And if we are just a little bit more aware, then perhaps we can prevent some of it. Threats can be categorized in 7 different ways. Today I'm just going to talk about malware, phishing, and social engineering. But there are other types of threats that can affect us. This slide here is talking about, there's 2 columns, left and the right. On the left-hand side is talking about information that is the target of a lot of the bad software. The goal of these people writing the software is to steal this information, right? And if they can get a hold of this information, they can steal your identity, at least in the United States and in many other countries as well. On the right-hand side is information that may not be as critical, but if they get a hold of it, they can pretend like they are you when they call institutions like banks and credit cards to try to trick their way into your accounts. All this information is housed here at the school on our systems. Okay, so our school is a threat. It's a place where they are trying to access to try to break into the systems. Now, it's not just computers in themselves that have this vital information, but it's our workspaces. And when we are at work, we need to think about not only people breaking into our computers, but people wandering around the school. For example, third-party vendors, maintenance people. For example, Netcom, which is a third-party vendor for support for technology, they walk into our rooms all the time and they have access to our computers. So we need to be very careful about our workspace and the people who have access to our workspace. For example, this slide shows a couple of areas that are typically might house some of this vital information that we don't want people to get a hold of. Calendar, sticky notes, your screen, computer screen, if you leave it open. These are places that have vital information that can be taken, right? So we need to just be cognizant of it and know that people can come by and take it, right? Now, malware, what is it? It's just bad software. And sometimes people are like, well, I'm not really sure if I'm infected or not, but there's a couple of telltale signs that will let us know if we might be infected. Number 1, if your computer is slow and sluggish, right? If your system's crashing a lot. Also, if some of the settings are changed. For example, a very common one is when the browser, search browser, is changed from a default Google search engine to some other search engine, right? So that is one way you can tell. Now, malware can be really bad, like the ransomware, like the other schools, but it could also be very benign, like just stealing information off your computer, like when you're doing searches, so they can spam you and others, right? Or it might be they can be anywhere to even stealing email addresses, right? So it can be from not very damaging to you to very damaging. Now, ransomware is the type of bad software that affected those 2 schools in our region recently. I'm going to show you a video right now, and you can watch it, and it kind of explains a little bit more about ransomware and what it is, okay?
Ordinarily, falling victim to a ransom plot means that you are the son or daughter of some rich person, and the only way to get out of it is by paying tons of money or waiting for Arnold Schwarzenegger Kurt Russell to come and rescue. At least that's what TV would have us believe. These days, being held for ransom can actually happen quite differently with your computer, of all things. I'm talking, of course, about ransomware, a particularly diabolical type of malware, that is to say bad software, that's been making headlines recently. So here's how it works. Once ransomware gets on your computer, usually through an infected email attachment or the all-too-common Trojan horse attack, it will lock your computer or your data in some way and demand payment in exchange for giving control of your system back to you. Some of the simpler forms of ransomware will simply try to fool you into thinking there's something wrong with your computer and get you to pay money to fix it. A common tactic that we see in those banner ads that tell you that you've been inexplicably infected by something. Now, oftentimes with those, you've probably got at least rudimentary control over your system still, so the only real issue is that you have to deal with these constant pop-ups until you find a way to get rid of the malware. A much more irritating kind of ransomware will lock your computer entirely and keep you from logging into your operating system unless you cough up the money. Many of these varieties of ransomware will display a threatening message purporting to be from the FBI or some other super hardcore police agency saying that your computer was used for something highly illegal, but you can get your computer back and avoid doing hard time just by paying a few $100s. Sounds absurd, right? But people have fallen victim to this, and even if you recognize the scam immediately, those ones can be a real pain to remove. Worst of all is the ransomware that not only locks your system, but also encrypts your files and won't provide you with the keys to decrypt them unless you pay up. The most notable of these being CryptoLocker, although many other variants have popped up since that one first made the news back in 2013. Some other issues with these, unsurprisingly, cybercriminals aren't exactly the most trustworthy folks, and many people have reported not getting their files back even after paying the ransom. And on top of that, there are some kinds of ransomware that don't even ask permission. They just hit your Bitcoin wallet and take the money without even giving you a chance to say, well, hold on, let me think about whether this data is actually worth paying for. So then, how can you rescue your computer and protect your cash if you get infected? Many of the non-encrypting types of ransomware can be removed by booting into safe mode and running an up-to-date anti-malware tool, or if that fails, downloading a bootable removal tool to a flash drive and running that. However, if you've been hit by an encrypting variety of ransomware, you're not going to want to hear this, but you're probably out of luck, as most of these use very strong encryption algorithms. In fact, the FBI, that's the real one, has advised people to just pay these ransoms in the past. So if you don't like the idea of your money going to online criminals, back up your data somewhere, preferably offline, and remember, please, to explain to your grandparents what a banner ad is if they call you in a panic over having 50 viruses on their all-in-one PC.
That's what ransomware is, and that's what hit those schools. But it's not just, computers that we need to think about, it's also our phones. Yeah. And this is where, we need to be really careful. If your phone gets infected and you have access to the network at school, and you bring your phone on to campus and access the network, theoretically, it can infect other devices. So we have to be really careful. Now, iOS has a more locked down app store, but it's not perfect, but it's a little bit better than Android. So if you have an Android phone, you've got to be really careful. Okay? And so that's one thing to also think about. Free Wi-Fi. We ask that when you are traveling that you don't use school-related software like the SIS or the LMS stuff. Stay off it until you get to where you're going. But you should also be really careful, accessing a bank account or any kind of account that has some kind of, financial aspect to it, right? Until you get to where you're going. Okay. And also, be really careful of hotel lobbies. Not the hotel room, but the lobbies. Those are very dangerous locations as well. One thing that I talk to teachers a lot about is, free stuff. And a lot of teachers are always interested in, watching Hollywood movies for free, listening to music for free, that kind of stuff, or downloading free software. Nothing is free in this world. Everyone's paying somehow. And usually when people are getting free stuff, they're having to load, even if it's a browser base, they have to load an extension usually of some kind. And so that can infect your computer, right? So you need to be really careful about that. What they're usually trying to get from you is, search information, which is very, benign. It's not very dangerous. They might even go as far as to steal your contact information, friends and family, right? And use that to spread whatever things they're doing. And also, a very common thing they're doing now is they're using your processing power of your computer to mine Bitcoin.
What does that mean?
Bitcoin is a type of money. It's a cryptocurrency, and so they'll infect your computer. You don't know it, and they're using the computer to mine Bitcoin. So it's making money for the bad guys. But it really takes your internet bandwidth and your processing power. It'll slow your computer down.
Even if you don't have, I don't have Bitcoin.
Right, you don't have to have Bitcoin. No, it'll use your computer. They infect thousands of computers, and they're all working. It's called like a botnet. So it's being one computer, and it's like mining Bitcoin, making a lot of money, right? Now, VPNs, this is how a lot of teachers do this, right? That they get this free stuff, is they're loading a VPN. Now, you have to remember, a VPN is circumventing laws in every country, right? So technically, they are criminals writing software that you install on your computer. And if you were to hire a babysitter, I will guarantee you would not hire a babysitter who has a criminal record, correct?
Yeah.
So why are you giving them 100% access to your computer? It's kind of crazy when you think about it. Now, obviously, being overseas, we can't access some banks, we can't access flights, airlines, and that makes it very difficult for us. So we have to use VPNs. Here in Nigeria, in particular, is the first time I've had to use a VPN, because usually I can skirt around it somehow. But if you're going to use a VPN, number one, pay for one versus get a free one. Because if you pay for one, there's an incentive for the company to make sure they don't mess up your computer.
Yeah.
Number two, if you're unsure which one to use, you can just Google top 5 or top 10 VPNs with the year and let the experts who deal with technology choose a list of ones that they recommend, right, that are probably safe. And you can always use the Opera browser, which is my favorite one to use. It's a browser like Netscape or Chrome or whatever. It's a free browser and it has a built-in VPN. I trust that company. I know a lot about them.
You just download it?
You download the browser and you can turn off and on the VPN. It's still not 100% safe. None of these are, but it's one that I trust. Now, I don't know of any person being infected by a VPN, but it's not to say that it can't happen in that it is not happening, right? So, something to think about. Passwords. Passwords is a place that we can definitely make improvements in our lives using technology. Just try to make a password that is long, is made up of easy to spell and remember words, and words that don't go together. If you do that, you will like our residence password, which is actually 19 characters long, and it would take a very long time to break or to hack. Yeah, it takes a long time. That's using a normal computer today. Now, obviously, as computers get faster and better, it'll shorten that time. But, many websites don't give you an option, though. You have to use special characters or weird characters and numbers and characters. You have to do that. You don't have a choice. But really, just make it long, words that don't go together, and very simple words. That's the best way to do it, best strategy. Now, phishing is using emails to try to get information from you, or to try to trick you into divulging your sensitive information. Now, the one rule to remember, the golden rule, is don't ever click on a link or a download in an attachment in an email.
Okay.
However, with that being said, if you expect an email from someone, you know they're sending you something, or at a specific time you always receive a specific email, more than likely it's legitimate, right? However, if any organization sends you an email, they have an internal messaging system. So you can always delete the email, go to their internal messaging system, like your bank, for example, has messaging inside their web page, and find the message there, right?
Okay.
So you can delete the email. It's not going to cause big problems for you anyway. Now, the next two I'm not going to talk about in detail, but it's spear phishing and harpoon or whale phishing, which is basically saying they're targeting specific people in an organization. You as a teacher, that's not really what we have to worry about. That's more like for the finance department or heads of departments.
Yeah.
You know, like Gray or LO, people who work at the head. Everyone knows who they are, even in the world,
Yeah.
and they are targeting them specifically because they have elevated permissions, right, and access to more information. Tips to stay out of the phishing net. Once again, don't click on any links ever in an email. Once again, unless you know,
Unless you
there's that
know.
caveat, unless you know someone's going to send you one. Okay? Social engineering is using the phone to call you up and to try to trick you. We've had teachers fall victim to that this summer. And so it's really important. Number one, these people are really good at what they do.
Right.
They will trick you if they know who you are and they call you. And it's hard to get off the line with them once they get you on the line. If that ever happens, what you need to do is just ask for their name and phone number and tell them you're busy and you'll call them back. Then hang up, find out the real phone number of that organization, call them back, and if it's legitimate, the person will be there.
Yeah.
Now, just some last minute tips here. Number one, update or patch your computer immediately. If Apple, Microsoft, or Google sends you a notification that there's an update, there's a reason they're sending it to you. Because they know there's a vulnerability and you need to update your computer. If you don't, you're leaving it open for attack.
Okay.
And people often say, well, what if it messes up my computer? And my response to that is, I'd rather have you mess up your computer than to get infected and come back and infect the rest of the school, right? Everyone else. Also, if you see something that's suspicious, ask. And it doesn't matter who you ask. It doesn't have to be a tech person. Ask anyone, right? 2 brains are better than 1. And if both people think it's suspicious, it probably is. And last but not least, if you think that you are infected, tell someone immediately so we can put out the fire. Right? And if you have a Windows computer and you have Chrome, in the settings, under advanced settings, at the very bottom is a free malware search tool from Google. If you have Windows, you could also just use Windows Defender. If you have an Apple computer, I recommend Malware Bytes. You can do a quick scan of your system. Okay, and those are all free tools.
Okay.